Some of you might have heard the story of how to boil a frog. Now, I apologize for this gory image because unless one is a sociopath, why would anyone want to boil a frog? But the image works well with what I want to talk about. So how do you boil a frog? You first put it in a lukewarm water, and the frog is happy. And then you very slowly turn up the heat. The frog does not realize that the water is getting warmer, and when it realizes, it's too late. I believe that what's happening with anti-Semitism in the world, but I will focus on our country, is quite similar. I think we, the Jews, have been in this lukewarm water for a long time, but the water is getting warmer and warmer. It's not boiling yet. We should not panic, but we should do something quickly. And this is the reason that I chose to talk about anti-Semitism. I'll be honest with you, I really didn't want to talk about it. There's so many important things to discuss, especially during the high holidays. And more than that, talking about anti-Semitism, I'm talking about them, about the people who hate us. They force me to talk about them, but what's the alternative? By not talking about it, I may send the message that the problem is not so big, it's not so important, we still have time, but I really believe we don't. Now, I've spoken about it several times in the past 5 or 6 years. Never before, but I did. And since I know that you always listen carefully to what I say, and you retain about 97.5% of the content of my sermons, I don't need the feel to repeat things that I had said before. So don't look at it as anti-Semitism 101. This is more the advanced version, but it is important because I'm going to emphasize a few things because I believe that we have to stop talking in general terms. We have to understand the nuances of what the anti-Semitism today means. Because now all of us are experts in viruses. And we saw how the coronavirus started some 1.5 years ago, and it kept mutating, and now we have the Delta, and God knows what we'll have next. And this is exactly what's happening, what has been happening for 3,000 years with anti-Semitism. It keeps changing forms, it keeps mutating, and sometimes it takes us too long to recognize it. So where are we standing now? I've heard many people saying, I never believed that I will feel anti-Semitism in America. Let me give you an answer to that. I cannot believe that people are surprised about anti-Semitism in America because America has a culture of anti-Semitism that never went away. It started with the first group of Jews who arrived in New Amsterdam in 1654, and the legendary general director of the colony, Stuyvesant, did not want them. He had to accept them because of some economic, commercial purposes, but a year later they got kicked out of the militia that was supposed to protect the colony because the non-Jews were disgusted by the presence of Jews with them. That's how it started. You see, some of the heroes of our nations, Charles Lindbergh, Henry Ford, was one of the biggest anti-Semites in the history. And he was elected at the time as the third most important person ever lived. just after Jesus Christ and Napoleon Bonaparte. You know, from 1920 to 1922, he published a column in his paper, The Dearborn Independent, for 2 years. The International Jew, the foremost problem of the world. He attached the Protocol of the Elders of Zion, that is the mother of all conspiracies against the Jews. He did not write it. It was written in Tsarist Russia. Basically argues that there is a Jewish cabal that wants to take over the world. They control the media, the money, and everything, and they will control the world. He attached it to all his papers. He blamed the Jews for starting World War I. He got a medal from Adolf Hitler, the highest medal that a non-German could get. And he's a hero. And why don't we know about it? Because many of us suffer from historical amnesia. The second Ku Klux Klan did not focus so much on black people as many people think. Their focus of hatred were Jews and Catholic. And they were not this marginal group of crazy people. And they were not limited to the South. They were a national, extremely well-organized organization with many members. One of the strongholds was actually the Northwest, like Washington and Oregon, that today we associate with very liberal people. No. There was always this story of this conspiracy that Jews are the puppeteers. We control everything. We cause people to do things because we were blamed for two things. We're the capitalist and we are the socialist. So no matter where you are, you hate us. And yeah, it calmed down a little after the Holocaust, but it never went away. So nothing is new. Nothing that you read, that you hear, that you experience is new. Only that for different reasons, in the past decade or so, people feel much more comfortable to express their hatred of the Jews. We like to say that anti-Semitism comes from the right and the left. Almost everyone writes and says it, which is true. But today, again, I want to talk more about the important nuances, because we need to understand. If you want to fight anti-Semitism, we want to understand it. Many people, even the two most important books from last year by Deborah Lipstadt and Barry Weiss that talked about anti-Semitism, focus mostly on anecdotes. And that's the way we think about it, right? We have a friend who has a niece who goes to UCLA, and we know, oh, colleges are really anti-Semitic and dangerous for Jews. But recently, there are some serious studies. And one that I will talk more about is a study that was done by a professor at Tufts University and a professor at Harvard. And they had a massive study, thousands of people in America, and we really have numbers. We can understand what people think. So first of all, the big numbers. About 12% of Americans are anti-Semitic. It's not more, it's not less than in the past. Actually, in numbers, it is more. So about 4 million people live here who are anti-Semitic. Most of them don't do anything about it, would never do anything about it. But when you have 40 million, it's quite a lot. There are two groups that are the most anti-Semitic. Now, before I say that, the biggest mistake that we, the Jewish community, does is that we politicize anti-Semitism. When we recognize anti-Semitism that comes from the left and we're conservative, we celebrate. Did you hear Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and all the Democrats are so? And we show them. And when it comes from the right, like Jews have these space lasers, people on the left, yeah, we showed you, you are worse than... And we fight against each other, and they win, and we lose. There's a beautiful story in the Mishnah that tells about a group of people who happen to be on a boat. And then one of them takes a drill and started to make a hole under his chair, under his seat. And people come to him and say, are you crazy? He said, mind your own business. This is my seat, right? What we do is slightly different. We look at the other saying, oh, you're making the hole, you're drilling it, you're going to cause our boat to sink, but we know exactly how to save the boat. And we fight, and we lose, and they win. I know how delicious it is to have these political debates and to have ammunition against the other group, but it's about us today. Stop these inner fightings. Stop to politicize it. We cannot afford it any longer. I know it's easier said than done, but we must. We pay a huge price. So I'm going to tell you a few things that immediately are going to say, no, I have a friend. Just try to listen, and you can always check what I'm saying. Everything is available online, actually much more than you even want to. So the two most anti-Semitic groups in America are young, right-wing people, and by young I'm talking about 30 and under, so people who lean to the right, under 30, and minority groups, mostly Latino Americans and Black Americans. They're more or less at the same place, but they're completely different, and that's what we have to understand, because people hate us for different reasons, and we have to know it, to recognize it, if we want to fight the right way. So we have to respond to different groups the way we should. So the right wing, the young people, the older people on the right are less anti-Semitic, which is surprising, not to us, but normally young people are more tolerant. They don't hate minority groups as much as older people for different reasons. One of them is that more education. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, it's the opposite. A lot about anti-Semitism does not follow the patterns of xenophobia, of hating strangers and hating other groups. Why does the right hate the Jews? Because they blame us mostly for two things. For being disloyal to this country and being disloyal to the white race. Right? Remember this protocol of the elders of Zion? The story never disappeared. It just morphs, just like the anti-Semitism and the virus. So the Jews don't care about America. All they care about is other Jews. And what they do is they take advantage of every country where they live. Same stories are in England and in Europe. They take advantage of everything they can, not for their country, but for themselves. And the other reason is, especially here in America, is the Jews betrayed the white people. Because we Jews were never really considered to be completely white. Philip Roth put it beautifully, said, it seems like the whiteness of the Jews is of a different color. So for example, in a book that was written in 1978, the Turner Diaries, I assume that none of you have read it. You can find it online, I found it. And it tells the story of how the Jews took over America. They banned guns, they promoted interracial marriages, anything to destroy the majority of white people. Because they're not really white, the Jews, and they hate when the white people are strong and are the majority. That's why Jews love immigrants. That's why Jews love people of color. That's why they support these interracial marriages. And that was a book that many people believe in. So if you remember in Charlottesville, the people with the tiki torches marching and shouting, "Jews will not replace us." And everyone there fully understood what they meant, but we need to understand too. What they meant is the Jews will not replace the white people with others, because that's what Jews want to do, to destroy the hegemony of white people here. So this is the main reason that they hate us, and this is everywhere. You don't have to go to the dark web and some secretive websites to find it. It's there. It's absolutely there. Why do the minority groups, mainly black and Latino Americans, hate us? You can say that they are on the left if you play the political game, that again, I beg you not to. And it is true, for the most part, they support the Democratic Party and the left, but they hate us for different reasons. They hate us because we are a competing minority group, and they see our success, and yes, we are a successful minority group in America. They see that we succeeded on their expense. We left them behind. We took advantage of them in order for us to succeed. Okay, so Jews and blacks in New York lived for a very long time, more or less in the same neighborhoods. And then Jews moved to the suburbs and did much better financially, socially. And many of them, by the way, remained the landlords of the blacks who used to be their neighbors, who likes his or her landlord, okay? But they look at us as Jews as taking advantage of them. And the other reason that they hate us is what we call the competition of victimhood. Many groups see themselves as victims, mostly for a right reason. But there is a competition who is a greater victim. And we, the Jews, because of the story of the Holocaust, rose to the top of the list, again on their expense. So if you're talking about the experience of slavery, of immigrants, of foreigners, our country still focuses on the Holocaust, and their victimhood is underappreciated, underrecognized. So they don't like us. Why do the left wings, or those, I'm not saying that all the left or all the right, right? It's only 12% of the people, so 88% do at least tolerate us. Why do they don't like the Jews? This is mostly about Israel. Now, people on the right, especially the far right, for them to say that they hate the Jews is part of what they do, because they don't like minority groups. They don't like Mexicans, they don't like blacks, they don't like the LGBTQ, they don't like. So not liking the Jews works well, it's consistent. But for people on the left, they love everyone, right? They support all the causes, so how can they don't like the Jews? And therefore, they would tell you, of course, we have nothing against the Jews. Our problems are with Israel. Now, many of you have problems with Israel. Many of you have problems with the United States of America. That's not a sin. That does not render you anti-Semitic. And by the way, loving Israel does not make you a lover of Jews. What they found in that research that I'm referring to and others is that some people really support Israel, not because they love the Jews, they actually don't like the Jews, but they hate Muslims more. And who fights the Muslim better than the Jews, better than Israel? Well, and others want Israel to be strong and successful, So all the American Jews will move finally to Israel and leave them alone. Not all of them. There are many people who love Israel and love the Jews. But I just wanted to know, since we're talking about nuances today, that you cannot just jump. There is no 100% correlation between supporting Israel and supporting the Jews in America. Many people on the left don't like Israel, say it mildly. But what makes it anti-Semitic? What makes it anti-Semitic is a few things. First of all, they don't believe that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. They will tell you, Israel has the right to exist, but not as a Jewish state. Because as already the UN legislated in 1971 that Zionism is racism. They canceled it in 1991, but this decision was 1975 to 1991. Okay, so Israel should not be a Jewish state, just another state in the Middle East. They denied the connection between the Jewish people and their land. They said that Jews are newcomers to Israel. And the worst thing is that they hold Israel to a much higher degree of ethics, if you will, of conduct than any other country in the world. And I'll just give you an example from last week. I don't know how many of you read in the paper that last Tuesday or Wednesday, an American drone killed 10 people in Kabul, 10 civilians, among them 7 children. It's horrible. I didn't read anywhere that Americans believe in ethnic cleansing, that they commit genocide. It was a mistake, collateral damage. I'm not cynical at all. It's painful. I saw the pictures of the 7 kids. One of them was 4 months old. He was not a terrorist. But what happens when Israel has a war with Gaza, with the Hamas, and an Israeli missile destroys a house and kills civilians and children? Whoa. That was not a mistake. That's ethnic cleansing. This is genocide. More than 20% of American Jews believe that Israel is an apartheid and even blame Israel for genocide. Okay, so this is the double standard. So when you just criticize Israel and what it does in the West Bank, and go ahead, do it. That's perfectly fine. Israelis do it better than anyone else. But when you cross the line and use apartheid, use ethnic cleansing, use images from the Holocaust to describe Israelis as the Nazis, well, you cannot just say that you criticize Israel, but you love the Jews in Israel. And this is the kind of anti-Semitism that we see mostly on the left. So they guise it as just anti-Israel. But I believe, like many others, that in many, many cases, it's just an easier way to be an anti-Semite. I love the Jews, but I hate everyone in Israel because they are so awful. And we have to understand, so we have to know where people come from, so we'll know how to answer and how to deal with them. And I'm going to end, not yet the sermon. I have a clock here. Oh, wow, I did speak for too long. But I have my favorite college student here. And everyone talks about how awful it is to be in college today as a Jewish person. So I asked my college student who told me, leave the kids alone. He said, each time an adult, a Jewish adult, talks to us, to Jewish students, the first question is, how about anti-Semitism in colleges? Of course, there is a problem. There is a problem. I cannot deny it. Nobody does. But for the most part, it is not as bad as some Jews say, because there are some Jewish organizations who'd like to exaggerate some of the things. And we have to stick to the facts, not to just rhetoric. What's happening in colleges? It's more complicated. And there is a wonderful study that was done by Stanford scholars. And yes, there is a problem because on the right, there are people who hate the Jews because of all the reasons I mentioned. And when Jewish students want to join some organizations with social action agenda, like being pro-LGBTQ and immigrants and refugees, etc., first thing they're asked to do is to denounce Israel. Because now, in the discourse, especially on the left side, Israel became the oppressor. If the Palestinians now are the symbol of all the oppressed people in the world, the Israelis are the symbol of all the oppressors in the world. So if you want to join some of our organizations like that, because many of our young students, the Jewish students, their tendency is to be on the left, and they want to do it, but they also love Israel. And they don't want to denounce Israel and to accuse Israel for doing all these things. So they find it hard they try to escape the right-wing crazes. They cannot really join these organizations. So now they have the Jewish groups on campus, right? Not really. Because when you try to join these Jewish groups, very quickly they demand that you will be very vocal with your support of Israel. What if you don't want to? You're not allowed to criticize Israel at all. You cannot go to Hillel and say something about Israel. They'll kick you out, and many other organizations. Now, it's not to say that these students don't love Israel. They do, but that's not what they want to do. They don't want to be vocal about it, and they have the right. Not every black person has to be an active member of Black Lives Matter. Not every gay person should be active in gay rights. We choose what we want to be active at. So the Jewish kids, many of them cannot find a home on campuses, and we have to know that partly is our problem or our fault. Because if being Jews and being part of a Jewish organization on campus means that you have to be vocal about your support of Israel, and if not, you're not welcome, well, we don't serve our kids right either. What shall we do? So I told you the first thing, stop politicizing it. Stop making holes under your seat on the boat, blaming others. Second, call it out when you see it. Even if it's your friends, even if they are members of your political party, call it out. Do you know that 46% of Americans don't know what anti-Semitism is? When I say Tree of Life, everyone here knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. When I say Poway, when I say Charlottesville, I don't need to explain anything, and we think that everyone knows. 46% don't even know what anti-Semitism is, let alone all these stories and how we suffer, okay? So we have to educate people. We have to know that they don't know. We need allies. We need other minority groups, like Asian Americans, like Latino Americans, because there are many similarities. But what I see in others is that while Jews are happy to fight the fights of other groups, they don't always reciprocate. So when Jews were attacked in May during this mini war with the Hamas, I did not see other organizations that are so supported by Jews constantly, other minority groups, stand up and say, hey, you have to stop this violence and anti-Semitic acts against the Jews. And we actually call them on it. We have to call them on. Educate yourself. I just started. I'll be happy to teach more about it. I taught in the past. I always believe we have to start with history, not because I believe that history has to repeat itself, but there are patterns that if we don't recognize and break, they will. Be proud, Jews. Don't try to hide it. Whenever Jews try to hide their Judaism, they suffered more. Of course, I'm a rabbi. I want to be in a shul every day, all day, but that's not my point. Right? If you have a Jewish star, wear it. Jews in the US, in the latest Pew Research, do recognize there is more anti-Semitism, but none of them, or almost none of them, says that they changed their life as a result of it. They're not afraid to go to places, to be identified as Jews. Let's not hide. Let's be even more Jewish. And the last thing that I would say is that don't jump and judge people as anti-Semites too fast. If you see your friend eating Ben & Jerry's, it does not mean that he or she is anti-Semite. They just love Chunky Monkey. No, we cannot do that. We cannot demand full commitment or you're out. We need each and every person. So let's recognize the problem. Let's understand the nuances. And let's fight back. Because you know what is the real story about the frog? Adam Grant, in one of his books, I don't know if it's the latest or the one before, he's from Wharton. He tells that he actually tried to boil a frog. And you know what really happened? When the water was too hot, the frog jumped out. The water is hot. We have to jump out, not to run away, to fight back, because we never back down. Shana Tova.